Welcome to our deep dive into ethical intelligence. We're going to be looking at why some people, seem to have this knack for making good decisions, ethically speaking, when things get a little bit tricky.
It's a question that people have been thinking about for centuries, right? And we're finally starting to uncover some answers that are backed by research.
And the best part is, this isn't some theoretical, deep dive. We're going to be looking at real, practical insights that can actually help you, the listener, sharpen your own, ethical decision-making. It's kind of like a workout for your moral compass, I guess.
I like that, a workout for your moral compass. And I think that starts with understanding what ethical intelligence is. It's not just knowing right from wrong. It's this kind of unique blend of, knowledge and skills and even character traits that help you navigate these sticky situations that life throws at you.
So it's like being an ethical detective, right?
Right.
You have to be able to first identify that there is an ethical issue at play, then gather all the facts, and then weigh the different perspectives, and ultimately decide on the best course of action.
Exactly. And this is so important today because ethical dilemmas are everywhere. AI ethics, climate change, social justice movements, these are all things that, need these skills.
Now, you might think, becoming ethically intelligent is as simple as attending a lecture or two, but research shows that actually those traditional ethics education courses, the kind that are really heavy on lectures and light on interaction, aren't actually that effective.
That's right. There was a major meta-analysis from Harvard, and what they found was that those lecture-centric ethics courses, they don't really improve real-world ethical decision-making that much.
Really? That's so interesting. So what's the problem with lectures? I mean, it's such a classic teaching method.
Well, I think when it comes to ethics, passive learning just doesn't really work. You can listen to someone talk about honesty, but that doesn't necessarily make you a more honest person. To really internalize those ethical principles, you have to actively engage with them, right? You have to grapple with real-world dilemmas and reflect on your own choices.
That's about putting it into action.
Right.
You got to get your hands dirty, so to speak, and practice that decision-making in those real-world situations. And this is where case-based learning comes in, right?
Right, exactly. Case-based learning is it's like boot camp for your ethical reasoning skills. Instead of just listening to someone talk about, different theories, you're presented with actual sticky situations that you might encounter in your real life.
So you're putting yourself in someone else's shoes and trying to figure out how to act, I guess.
Yeah.
And that's got to be so much more engaging than just listening passively.
Right.
But does this approach, does it actually work?
It does. A study at the University of Melbourne, what they found was that students who used case-based learning, they were much better at spotting ethical issues. And not only that, they were better at coming up with nuanced solutions. It turns out that wrestling with these tough choices, even if it's in a simulated environment, makes you a sharper ethical thinker.
It makes sense, right? It's like learning to play an instrument or a sport. You can read all the books, watch all the videos you want, but nothing really replaces actually practicing and making mistakes and learning from those experiences.
It's a great analogy, and it highlights how important active learning is when you're developing ethical intelligence. And along with case studies, there's another powerful tool, and it's called moral dilemma discussions.
Moral dilemma discussions.
Yeah.
It sounds intense, like a philosophy debate club where you're arguing about ethics.
Well, maybe not that intense. But the basic idea is to engage in thoughtful discussions with people about ethical dilemmas, real-world ethical dilemmas. And it's about challenging your own assumptions, listening to other people's perspectives, and kind of refining your own reasoning skills.
So instead of thinking about these dilemmas in your head, you're kind of bouncing ideas off of other people and, testing your logic and being exposed to new ways of thinking about these challenges.
Right. And these discussions can really affect your ability to reason through those dilemmas. A study of high school ethics classes found that students who had those group discussions, they actually scored higher on moral reasoning tests than those who didn't. And the researchers think that this peer-to-peer interaction is a big part of sharpening those critical thinking skills.
It's wild to think that just talking about ethics with other people can actually improve your ethical thinking. But you can't just stay in the hypothetical forever, right? At some point, you have to actually face these challenges in real life.
Absolutely. That's where something called experiential learning comes in. It's like ethics in action. It's about confronting these dilemmas not just in a textbook or in a classroom, but out in the world.
So we're talking about simulations, internships, service learning projects, things like that.
Yeah, experiences that put you right in the middle of the action and force you to make those decisions. And research has shown that this type of learning can have a huge impact on your ethical development. A study at Stanford found that students who were in these service learning projects, where they were applying their knowledge and skills to social issues, they became much better at spotting ethical dilemmas in their everyday lives.
So it's like they built up this ethical muscle
Right on.
memory. They weren't just thinking about ethics, they were like living it. But where does the digital world fit into all of this? I mean, can technology help us become more ethically intelligent?
Absolutely. There's a whole field called digital ethics education. It's about how to use technology to teach ethics in a way that is more interactive and engaging and effective.
So things like, using AI to create simulations or online platforms where people can engage in ethical debates, things like that.
Exactly.
But does it actually work?
Yeah. A study at MIT, what they found was that students who used AI platforms to work through those dilemmas, they actually did better on ethical reasoning tests than their peers. And the reason for that is that these platforms allowed those students to see what happens when you make certain choices. They could experiment, they could make mistakes, and they could see the impact of their choices in real time.
It's like a flight simulator, but for ethical decision making.
Right.
You get to practice navigating tricky situations, but without the risk of, a real world crash.
But I have to ask, can AI really teach something as nuanced as ethics? I mean, it's such a complex topic.
That's a great question, and it brings up a very important point. AI has amazing potential in this area, but it's not a magic bullet. This is where things get really interesting. So tell me, what are the limitations?
Right.
Where do humans still need to be involved?
One of the biggest limitations is that AI, at least in its current form, struggles with things like, emotional nuance and empathy.
That makes sense. Ethics isn't just cold, hard logic, right?
Yeah.
It's also about understanding the impact our choices have on other human beings.
Exactly.
So AI might be able to analyze a dilemma from a purely logical standpoint, but can it really grasp those emotional complexities, the ones that, we as humans bring to the table?
Right. And there's also this concern that if we rely too much on algorithms, it could actually make it harder for us to develop our own moral intuitions. We don't want to just outsource our ethical decision-making to machines, right? We need to be able to think critically, weigh different perspectives, and come to judgments that, are in line with our own values.
So it's about finding the right balance. We don't want to reject AI completely,
Right.
but we also don't want to become too reliant on it. It seems like the ideal approach is to use AI as a tool to help us learn and grow ethically, but not as a replacement for our own judgment.
Exactly. The future of ethics education is probably going to involve a hybrid approach, one that combines the strengths of AI with the irreplaceable role of human educators.
I like that. So it's about using the best of both worlds.
Mm-hmm.
AI can handle, things like giving feedback or simulating different situations, but human instructors are still needed for those things that require human connection, emotional intelligence, and really deep critical thinking.
Exactly. It's about creating a learning experience that's both, technologically advanced and deeply human.
Ethical intelligence isn't just something you develop in a classroom or through some digital platform, though, is it? It's a journey that continues throughout our lives.
Absolutely. We are constantly learning and changing and evolving, through our families, our friends, our work, and our communities.
So every experience, every interaction, every challenge we face can shape our ethical compass.
Right.
It's really a lifelong process.
It is.
Of learning and reflecting and refining our decision-making.
Exactly.
Now, before we go any further, I want to talk about the early stages of this development.
Mm-hmm.
What role do our families and our peers play in shaping our moral compass, especially when we're kids and teenagers?
Well, developmental psychology tells us that those early years are super important. I mean, our families and peers have this profound impact on, how we learn to tell right from wrong. It's like laying the foundation for our ethical framework.
So they provide the blueprint
Yeah.
for our moral compass.
Yeah.
They guide us as we're, figuring out how to navigate those early ethical dilemmas.
Exactly. And parents in particular, they play a really key role here. Studies have shown that children who are raised in what are called authoritative households, which means that the parents have, clear expectations, but they also provide a supportive environment, they tend to develop higher levels of moral reasoning, and they're more likely to engage in what we call pro-social behavior.
So it's not just about laying down the law. It's about explaining the reasoning behind it, It's about teaching empathy and understanding. And most importantly, it's about, modeling ethical behavior ourselves.
Exactly. It's about being open to conversations about moral issues, encouraging our kids to think critically and showing them that, hey, even as adults, we struggle with these dilemmas too. We're trying our best to do what's right.
Kids are always watching. They pick up on our values, our behaviors, even when we don't realize it.
Right. And as kids get older, move into adolescence, peers become, really important as well.
Right.
As we interact with our friends, we're exposed to different perspectives.
Yeah.
We have to negotiate conflict, we learn to compromise, and we start to develop a sense of, fairness.
So the playground becomes like a real-world laboratory for ethical development.
You could say that. It's where we take those early lessons from our families and start to put them into practice and start to really develop our own moral identity.
All these experiences contribute to forming that moral identity. It's that sense of who we are and what we believe in, including our ethical values.
Exactly. As we transition into adulthood, we become more self-aware, more independent, and we start to solidify those core values that are going to guide us, as we go through life.
But ethical development doesn't just stop there.
All right.
Even as adults, we're constantly encountering new situations, new challenges that force us to reevaluate, what we believe in.
Absolutely. Our workplaces, our communities, our online interactions, they all continue to shape us ethically. It's a lifelong process of growth and adaptation.
So ethical intelligence is really a lifelong journey.
It is.
It's not a destination. It's this ongoing process of, exploring and reflecting and evolving.
Exactly.
And the more we understand about this fascinating process, the more we can, cultivate ethical intelligence in ourselves and the people around us.
Absolutely.
Now, speaking of cultivating ethical intelligence, let's go back to AI for a minute. We've talked about the potential, we've talked about the limitations, but what about the specific benefits of using AI for teaching ethics?
There are several benefits, and one that researchers are really excited about is personalized learning.
Yeah.
AI systems can assess a student's ethical reasoning skills and then create a learning experience that's tailored to their specific needs.
So it's like having a personal ethics tutor.
Yeah, it's like having a tutor that can adjust the difficulty level and provide feedback that's customized for you.
And that can be really effective, right?
It can. A study at Carnegie Mellon University found that students who used AI tutors, they got a lot better at analyzing ethical dilemmas and making more nuanced ethical judgments.
That's incredible. So it seems like AI can be a powerful tool for helping us hone our analytical skills when it comes to ethical decision making. But what about the less tangible aspects? Things like empathy and emotional intelligence. Can AI really help us develop those?
While AI might not be able to fully replicate human empathy, it can create learning experiences that expose students to diverse perspectives, things that make them really challenge their own assumptions.
So even if AI can't feel empathy, it can help us understand and appreciate the perspectives of other people.
Right.
And that's a key step in developing empathy ourselves.
Exactly.
And one way AI can do that is through simulations. We talked about that a bit before, but I'm curious to learn more.
Sure.
How can AI-powered simulations help us develop our ethical reasoning?
Imagine a virtual world where you're faced with a complex dilemma, right? Maybe a really difficult medical decision or a challenging business negotiation or even a thorny social justice issue.
It's like those choose your own adventure books, but with real-world ethical consequences.
I love that. And what's great is that these simulations can be incredibly, realistic. You're not just reading about these dilemmas. You're experiencing them firsthand. You're making choices and seeing those consequences play out.
So it's visceral, right?
Yeah.
It's emotional, and it helps you connect with the dilemma on a deeper level.
Right.
But does that actually lead to, better decision-making?
A study at the University of Southern California found that students who did those AI-driven medical simulations, they were much more engaged and they had a much deeper understanding of the ethical complexities of healthcare. They were able to, take those principles and apply them in a way that felt real.
Makes sense. When you're actively involved, making those choices, seeing the consequences, you grasp it all so much better.
Yeah.
Now, how can AI help us navigate the complexities of, different cultures having different ethical values and beliefs? That's got to be tricky.
That's a crucial point, and it's something that AI can be really helpful with. AI systems can be programmed with information from, lots of different cultures, lots of different philosophical traditions.
So instead of just learning about ethics from our own limited perspective,
Right.
we could use AI to expand our horizons and challenge those assumptions.
Yeah.
We can step outside of our own bubble and see the world through different ethical lenses.
Exactly. A study at the University of Notre Dame found that students who used AI simulations that, showed different ethical viewpoints were much better at handling those cultural differences. They could make decisions that took into account, multiple people's values. They were more empathetic. They were more understanding.
So AI can help us be more ethically, sophisticated and globally aware. It can help us bridge cultural divides and build more ethical relationships.
It definitely can. And on top of all of that, AI can also just help us learn more efficiently and effectively.
Okay, how so?
Well, AI systems are very scalable, meaning they can provide consistent feedback and guidance to lots of different learners, without needing a ton of instructors.
So it's like having a whole army of ethics tutors,
You could say that.
available 24/7, ready to give you personalized feedback whenever you need it.
Exactly.
And that's got to be a huge benefit, especially for schools that want to teach ethics on a larger scale.
Right. It can be really challenging to give that kind of, personalized support when you have a lot of students.
Yeah. But with AI, it's much more doable.
That's impressive. So it seems like AI has a lot to offer when it comes to teaching ethics, but of course, no technology is perfect. We talked about some of the limitations before, but I want to talk a little bit more about the potential for bias. I mean, that's a big concern.
It is. As we said, AI systems learn from data. And if that data reflects the biases that already exist in society, those biases can get baked into the algorithms.
So if we're using AI to teach ethics,
Right.
we need to be incredibly careful that we're not perpetuating harmful stereotypes or making existing inequalities worse.
Absolutely. A study at Princeton found that some AI systems used in education actually did reinforce those gender and racial biases.
That's alarming.
It is.
It really highlights the need to carefully examine the data used to train these systems.
Definitely. We need to make sure that AI is being used to make people more aware of ethics and more inclusive, not the opposite. So it sounds like the key is to approach AI with caution and awareness and a real commitment to mitigating those potential risks. It's a powerful tool, but it needs to be used responsibly.
I agree. We need to be mindful of those limitations, and we need to be really vigilant in addressing that potential for bias.
Even with these limitations, though, there's a lot of excitement about the potential here. And researchers are coming up with some really creative ways to use AI alongside human educators.
Right. The future of ethics education is probably going to be all about these hybrid models, approaches that use the best of both.
So what would that look like in practice? What are some of the possibilities?
Well, imagine a classroom where AI systems do the routine stuff, like grading or giving feedback.
Okay.
And that frees up the human instructors to lead more in-depth discussions, to, encourage more emotional engagement, and to really focus on those issues that need human judgment.
So it's the perfect partnership.
Right.
AI doing the heavy lifting so the humans can do what they do best, inspire and guide their students.
Exactly. And there's research to back that up. In these hybrid courses, the ones that combined AI feedback with human-led discussions, they showed a lot more improvement in their ethical reasoning skills.
It suggests that we really can get the best of both worlds, right? If we thoughtfully integrate AI into the learning process.
Absolutely. We can leverage those strengths while still recognizing how important it is to have that human connection and guidance. And outside the classroom, AI can also be a good tool for self-reflection.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more about that.
Well, you can have systems that track your ethical decisions over time and give you insight into your progress and the things you might need to work on.
So it's like a fitness tracker, but for your morals.
That's a great way to put it.
It can show you how your thinking has evolved over time.
Right. It's a really powerful tool for self-awareness and growth.
So even though there are challenges and things to think about with using AI in education, the benefits are really clear. And it seems like the future of ethics education is really tied to how we integrate AI into the process.
I agree. It's a really exciting time to be exploring all of this.
Now let's shift back to the human side of all this.
Okay.
We talked about families and peers being important when we're young, but what about the things that continue to shape our moral compass as adults?
As we get older, our workplaces, our communities, and even our online interactions, all of those things continue to shape our ethical perspectives.
So like we're constantly running into new ethical dilemmas and challenges, right?
Yeah.
Things that force us to reevaluate our beliefs.
Yeah.
Life throws us curveballs.
Exactly. And for many adults, the workplace is one of the biggest informal learning environments.
And let's talk about the workplace. We spend a lot of our time there.
Right.
So it makes sense that it would have a big impact on our ethical development. How do those experiences shape our moral compass?
Well, for a lot of people, the workplace is where they first encounter ethical dilemmas that have, real-world consequences.
It's different from debating in a classroom.
It is.
This is about your career, your colleagues, even your company's reputation.
Exactly. And the culture of a workplace, in terms of ethics, can have a huge impact on an individual's moral development.
So if you're in an environment where ethical behavior is valued, where leaders model that behavior, you're more likely to develop strong principles yourself.
Absolutely. There was a study by Linda Trevino on ethical leadership.
Okay.
And she found that leaders who model that behavior, who are open to conversations about ethics, they create environments that encourage moral growth among their employees.
So it's not just about setting rules
Right.
and making people follow them. It's
Yeah.
about creating a culture where people feel supported in making ethical choices. It's about showing people that ethics matter, not just saying it.
Exactly.
But actions speak louder than words.
Right. And it's about understanding that ethical dilemmas are just part of doing business and that people need the right tools to navigate them effectively.
Now, aside from the workplace, what are some other informal environments that contribute to our ethical development?
Well, I think community involvement plays a big role.
So getting involved in local government, volunteering, even just having conversations with people who have different opinions, that can all help us grow ethically.
It can. Those experiences expose us to diverse perspectives, and they make us challenge our assumptions, and they help us develop a broader understanding of, ethical issues.
And research has shown that civic engagement can actually lead to more ethical awareness and action.
It can. Cornell University did a study that found that adults who are really active in their communities are more likely to act in ways that align with their values.
It makes sense. When you're involved in making your community a better place, you're constantly faced with ethical choices.
Right.
And you have the opportunity to put your values into action.
And even just having those conversations with people who see things differently can be so valuable.
Because it forces us to listen,
It does.
to consider those alternative arguments, to challenge our own biases. It helps us become more open-minded.
It does. And it helps us develop the empathy and understanding that are so essential for ethical decision-making.
Now, it's important to remember that this isn't just about us as individuals, right? Our ethical development is also influenced by our culture.
Absolutely. Our culture's values and norms play a huge role in shaping our ethical frameworks.
So something that might be considered ethical in one culture might not be in another.
Right. Anthropologists have found that, in cultures that are more collectivist, they tend to place more emphasis on community-based learning
Okay.
and, a shared responsibility for morals.
Whereas individualistic cultures might focus more on autonomy and individual rights.
Exactly. And those differences can influence everything, how we view honesty, fairness, how we approach conflict.
So it's important to be aware of those nuances
It is.
and to be respectful of different perspectives.
Absolutely. Understanding how culture plays a role in ethical development is essential for navigating our world.
And speaking of navigating our world, let's talk about the role of technology in all of this.
Okay.
We've talked about AI and education, but what about the bigger picture? How is technology affecting ethical decision-making in general?
Well, technology is changing pretty much every aspect of our lives.
It is.
And it's creating new ethical dilemmas all the time. It feels like we're constantly trying to catch up, trying to figure out how to apply our ethics to these new technologies.
The pace of change is just so fast, it's hard to keep up.
It is. And it's not just about adapting to those new technologies.
Right.
We also have to understand how technology is changing the very nature of ethics.
So it's not just the ethics of technology.
Right.
It's the technology of ethics. It's about how the tools we use are shaping our values and our choices.
Exactly.
And data privacy is a prime example of this.
It is.
It's a hot topic, and for good reason. With so much information being shared online, how do we make sure we're using that data ethically?
It's a complex issue, but one of the most important principles is transparency.
Okay.
Companies and organizations that collect our data, they need to be upfront about how they're using it, and they need to give us control over our own information. We should have a say in how it's used and shared.
It's not just about protecting our personal information from misuse. it's also about preventing harm.
It is?
For instance, if an algorithm used for hiring is biased against certain people, that's a big problem. It can reinforce existing inequalities and limit opportunities.
Absolutely. That's why we need to make sure ethical considerations are at the forefront when we develop new technology. We need to think about how this tech will impact individuals, communities, and society as a whole.
And it's not just data privacy. There are also ethical challenges related to AI, social media, even just how we interact online.
It's true. And these challenges are constantly evolving. We're in a state of constant exploration, trying to figure out how to navigate all of this.
It's fascinating. It's challenging. It's a little bit daunting, too, isn't it?
It can be. But the good news is we have tools and resources to help us.
We do.
And the more we understand about ethical intelligence, the better we'll be at making those responsible and thoughtful decisions. I completely agree. Knowing more gives us the power to have a positive impact on the world.
Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to just take a moment to appreciate how complex all of this is.
Yeah.
Ethical development is not a simple process.
It isn't. It's this lifelong journey shaped by so many things. How we were raised, our experiences, our culture, the tech we use, our communities.
And it's a journey that requires us to always be thinking, learning, and growing. It's about challenging ourselves to be more ethically aware, to be more compassionate, to be more just.
Absolutely. And while there will be challenges, it's also incredibly rewarding to strive to be more ethically intelligent.
Because at the end of the day, ethical intelligence isn't just about making the right choices.
Right.
It's about living a life that aligns with our values and helping to make the world a better place.
I love that. It's about recognizing that we're all connected and that the choices we make have a ripple effect.
So as we continue to explore this, let's keep in mind that it's not just about what we know.
Right.
It's about who we are and who we want to be.
That's a great point. That's a really good point.
And in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to go even deeper into how technology and ethics are intertwined. So stay tuned.
Looking forward to it. Welcome back to our deep dive into ethical intelligence. We just talked about all the foundational things, about ethical intelligence and how they shape our lives every day. Now let's talk about how technology is shaping our ethical landscape.
Yeah, tech isn't just some tool, right?
Yeah.
It's changing the way we think, how we talk to each other, and, ultimately how we make decisions, especially ethically.
And as technology keeps advancing, it brings up all these ethical dilemmas that we gotta wrestle with. It's like we're in uncharted territory ethically.
It's not even just applying the ethical frameworks we already have to these new technologies. It's like we need to understand how technology is changing what ethics even is.
Right, exactly. It's always changing, always evolving. And social media is like a perfect example of that.
Okay, social media, it's a huge part of our lives, but it's also, it's a breeding ground for ethical challenges.
It is. Social media platforms have given us these incredibly powerful ways to connect, to share information, but they've also amplified some of the most difficult ethical dilemmas we're facing today.
Like misinformation, online harassment, the erosion of our privacy. It's like every day these problems get more complex.
Yeah, and one of the biggest issues is that these platforms are designed to be addictive, almost like they're hijacking our attention.
You're right. It's like the algorithms are always feeding us content that keeps us scrolling, liking, and sharing. It's hard to break free from that cycle.
And that constant flow of information can create these echo chambers where you only see things that confirm your existing beliefs.
Right.
And that makes it even harder to have those, meaningful, complex conversations about ethics because we're not being challenged.
So it's not just about the content itself. It's how these platforms are built. The algorithms, the way they're designed to keep us hooked. Social media is shaping our ethical landscape in ways we don't even realize, maybe.
Exactly. And I think that brings up an important question about, how much responsibility these companies have to fix these problems. I mean, they have so much power, it needs to be used responsibly, ethically.
They're not just neutral platforms, They're shaping the information we see and how we interact with each other. They have to think about the ethical side of what they're doing.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another frontier in this whole tech and ethics conversation, I think artificial intelligence.
AI. I mean, it's everywhere these days. And while it has the potential to solve some of the world's biggest problems, there are some ethical questions we just can't ignore.
One of the biggest ones is bias, especially when AI is being used to make decisions that affect people's lives.
We talked about this with education, but it's everywhere. Hiring, loans, even criminal justice. We have to make sure these systems are fair, that they're not biased.
Exactly. AI learns from data, right? And if the data is biased, the algorithms become biased, and then you have AI systems that are making unfair decisions.
It's like if you teach a kid something by only showing them one side of the story. They're going to have a biased view, right? The same thing can happen with AI. We got to be careful we're not creating systems that are prejudiced, even if we don't mean to.
That's why we need people who really get this, who can spot those biases and advocate for AI being developed responsibly. That's ethical intelligence.
AI isn't neutral. It reflects our values.
Yeah.
You know, the data we use to train it, the way we design the algorithms. We need to be thoughtful about the decisions we give these systems the power to make.
And we need to think about how AI could be used in ways that like erode our privacy and our autonomy.
Yeah, it's like as AI gets smarter, it's starting to make decisions that humans used to make.
Right.
Self-driving cars, AI that can diagnose medical conditions. It's amazing. But what about responsibility?
Yep.
Accountability? Does this affect our freedom?
Exactly. Like what happens if a self-driving car has an accident? Whose fault is it? It's a question we need to figure out.
And what about using AI for surveillance?
Yeah.
Or manipulating people? We need to create some ethical guidelines for how to use these technologies. It's got to be about using AI to make life better for everyone, not to control people or take away their choices.
Right. We've got to make sure technology helps us thrive.
Now, going back to what we were saying earlier, ethical development, it's a journey, not a destination.
It is.
We're always learning, always growing. And the more we accept that, the better we'll be at handling the ethical challenges life throws at us.
And it's not just about individual growth either. It's about working together to make a more ethical society.
It's about having those conversations, challenging ourselves, making sure we have policies and practices that promote ethical behavior.
Exactly. It's about working together.
And it's not about blaming each other, right? It's about taking responsibility for what we do, for our own choices.
And that brings us to another big part of ethical intelligence, actually acting on your values. Knowing what's right isn't enough. You got to have the courage to do something about it.
It's hard to speak up sometimes, especially if there's pressure to just go along with things or if you could get in trouble.
Right, but ethical intelligence helps you act with integrity. It
Sure.
gives you the tools to advocate for change, to challenge injustice.
And speaking of integrity, we got to talk about leadership because leaders play a big role in promoting ethical behavior.
Ethical leadership is huge. It's about creating a culture where people feel like they can speak up, where they can challenge things that are wrong.
So it's not just about leaders making ethical decisions. It's about giving other people the power to do the right thing, too.
Exactly. They need to be transparent, accountable. They need to lead by example.
Yeah.
And they need to create systems that really support ethical decision-making.
Ethical leadership isn't about, just following the rules.
Right.
It's about creating a sense of purpose, making sure everyone feels valued.
And ethical dilemmas are usually complex, right? It's not always clear what the right thing is.
Right.
Good leaders need to be able to have those difficult conversations. They need to make decisions that are both morally and strategically sound.
Finding that balance where ethics and effectiveness, work together.
Exactly.
Ethical leadership, it's a journey, just like our own ethical
Yeah,
development.
it is. It's a journey worth taking.
It really is, because it leads to organizations that are successful but also ethical, ones that have a positive impact.
Before we finish this part, I want to leave you with a question. How is technology shaping not just the ethical choices we make, but what it even means to be human?
It's a big question. As technology advances, the line between, natural and artificial, human and machine, it's getting blurry.
Yeah. We're asking questions we never had to before. What does it mean to be human if there's AI? What is consciousness? These are big questions.
They're questions philosophers have been thinking about forever, but now they're more urgent.
We need a new ethical framework to guide us. We need to make sure technology helps us, that it doesn't, take away from our humanity.
It's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity to shape the future in a way that reflects our values.
Absolutely. Now let's move on to the final part of our deep dive. We're going to look at some real practical strategies for becoming more ethically intelligent, both as individuals and together.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into ethical intelligence. We've talked about a lot of stuff like how we make ethical decisions and how tech plays a role. Now let's think about how we can actually get better at this, in our own lives.
Yeah, great question. The good news is that ethical intelligence is something you can work on. Like any other skill, it's not something you're born with. You can learn it. You can get better at it.
So it's like, working out a muscle.
Yeah.
The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Exactly.
But where do we even start? How can we boost our ethical intelligence?
One of the biggest things is just being more aware of the ethical side of things, recognizing that even small decisions can have ethical implications.
So being mindful, like really thinking about our choices and how they affect other people, not just going on autopilot.
Exactly. It's about stopping for a second and asking yourself, what are my values here? What might happen if I do this? Not just to me, but to other people.
So tuning into that inner voice, the moral compass. But how do you make that voice louder? Especially when you're dealing with a really tough decision.
That's where ethical frameworks can help. These are like structured ways of thinking about ethical dilemmas. They give you these principles or guidelines that can make it easier to approach tricky situations.
So it's like having a checklist, instead of just going with your gut.
Exactly. And one of the most popular frameworks is utilitarianism.
Oh, yeah, utilitarianism. Greatest good for the greatest number of people.
Right.
But it's not just about, like, calculating outcomes, is it?
No, it's not that simple. Utilitarianism has its limits. Sometimes if you only focus on the outcome, you can end up making decisions that aren't really ethical when you look at it from other perspectives.
So you're saying it's not like a one-size-fits-all solution.
Right.
You might need to think about other frameworks, too, like that one where it's all about following the rules no matter what.
Deontology.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
Or virtue ethics, where it's all about developing good character traits.
Exactly. It's good to have different tools, for thinking about ethics. That way you can really understand the situation and make a more informed decision.
It's like getting a second opinion from a doctor. You want to get as much info as possible before making a big decision.
Right.
But ethical decisions, you don't always make them on your own, right? A lot of times, you got to work with other people, figure out different values and priorities.
Absolutely. Ethical dilemmas often pop up when you're working with others, at work, in your community, online. So you need good communication skills, and you have to be able to collaborate to really handle those situations well.
So ethical intelligence isn't just knowing the answers.
No.
It's also about being able to explain yourself, listen to other people even when you don't agree, and find some common ground.
You have to have empathy. You have to recognize that other people might see things differently and that that's okay. And you got to know how to work together to find solutions that are ethical and practical.
You got to be a good negotiator.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
It's not about winning. It's about finding a solution that works for everyone and stays true to ethical principles.
Exactly.
Okay, so how do we go from all this theory to actually doing it? What can we do to get better at this in our daily lives?
A few things. First, surround yourself with people who share your values. Find those mentors, friends, colleagues, people who will challenge you to be better ethically.
It's like finding your ethical support system.
Exactly. And be that role model for others, too. Remember, seeing someone else act ethically can be really powerful.
Actions speak louder than words, right?
They do. Another thing you can do is really trying to see things from different perspectives. Read books, listen to podcasts, go to talks, talk to people who see the world differently.
Expand your horizons.
Yeah. The more you understand different ethical views, the better you'll be at navigating all those complicated situations that come up in life.
And don't forget, this is a journey. We're going to make mistakes.
We are.
The important thing is to learn from them,
Exactly.
Keep getting better.
It's like anything else. The more you practice and think about it, the better you get.
But we don't have to do it alone.
Right.
We can learn from other people, help each other out.
Ethical intelligence isn't just about you. It's about everyone. It's about working together to make the world a better, more ethical place.
So as we wrap up, let's remember that we can all be more ethically intelligent. We all have the power to make good choices, to make a difference.
I love that. The world needs people who are ethically intelligent.
It does.
People who can deal with all the complexity of life, with wisdom, with compassion, with integrity.
And we can be those people.
You can be those people.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into ethical intelligence. We hope you learned something. Keep exploring, keep asking those tough questions, and keep working on being the best, most ethical version of yourself. We'll see you next time.